It was complete bliss, but it was like I was within this hurricane of light that was also unconditional love. But that word is like a cartoon character compared to what it actually was. It was like all the love of the universe directed towards me, and it felt like an all-consuming, endless ocean of love. And this love was a being, it was a presence, it was very personal, and it was also creative by nature of being what it was creating. By its very existence was creation, and it was like it was expressing itself as music and math and geometry and color and laughter and warmth and love and joy and bliss. It was like being in the middle of the sun, maybe, and seeing all of this just express all around you.
Welcome, modern day mystics, fellow truth seekers, James and Justin back again. And today we have another special guest with us. We have Melissa Denyce from the Love Covered Life podcast. Now, she is a pre-birth and spiritual experiencer and also a speaker, writer, artist, wife, and mother. Now, a lot of her show focuses on having guests on who've had near-death experiences or supernatural experiences. So I'm sure we're going to be able to ask her a lot of questions about the insight she's picked up over the years.
And as like an added aspect of this, which is kind of interesting, she comes from like a Christian background.
Yeah.
And, the first video she put out there was like, I am a Christian, but nevertheless, I have these pre-birth memories. And then you kind of see a spiritual evolution over the years of where she goes from there.
Well, anyway, guys, we won't keep you waiting. Let's get into it. All right, great. Melissa, thank you so much for being on the show. Like we do with all our guests, I think a great place to begin sometimes is with their backstory. So maybe for our audience out there, you could let them know a little bit about who you are and how you got to this place where you are right now.
Absolutely. I would love to. Thank you for having me. I love your podcast. I'm excited to be here. My background was in strict Christianity. I was raised in Reformed Baptist, a very extreme fundamentalist branch. And from a young age, I was very sincere about my faith because I have pre-birth memories of divine bliss from before this life, which I know can be maybe a strange thing to hear if you haven't heard that before. But all I wanted in life was to experience this divine bliss again, and it was kind of an obsession. And so I looked for that within my faith for all my growing up years. As a teenager, I became obsessed with chasing spiritual experiences. I left the strict branch of Reformed Baptist Christianity when I was 19 and joined a non-denominational charismatic church because I wanted spiritual experiences, and charismatics are much more open to that type of thing.
Yeah.
I had an out-of-body experience at the age of 18 where I was finally reunited with the divine bliss of my pre-birth memories, which only fueled my fire. I just wanted to experience it again. I became a spiritual experience junkie, and I chased spiritual experiences unsuccessfully for the next 4 or 5 years. And I eventually just got very burnt out with it. I decided maybe I just imagined the whole thing. I shut down my spiritual connection for the first time in my life, which set the stage for a spiritual awakening, as it does for many people. I discovered near-death experience accounts about the age of 29, and my Christian faith just was not doing it for me at the time. My family was really struggling, and I was finally willing to look outside of the Christian faith for answers at that time, and I found everything I needed and deconstructed my faith overnight when I discovered the near-death experience and the beautiful, simple messages of God is love, everything is divine, and the purpose of life is to learn how to love. It's all about loving each other. And from there, I had this massive spiritual awakening where I experienced that bliss for the first time embodied in this life. It was spontaneous and it lasted for months, maybe even up to about a year or so before I started to come down. And then I swung to the other extreme of going through a dark night of the soul, dealing with a lot of anxiety, and even developed a panic disorder at that point in my life until I began to learn how to access that bliss, that divine connection within myself through spiritual practices of meditation and mindfulness and embodiment, acceptance, all of those things that we hear about so often from the spiritual masters. And now I'm at a place in my life where I just want to share. I want to share the path, the divine bliss and the love, and the fact that it's available to everybody. And so I have a podcast where I interview spiritual experiencers, and then I also do my own teachings centered around deconstruction and simplifying spirituality and metaphysics for people. And I'm just starting to venture into doing healing work. So that's a little bit of my backstory.
And that is a lot, of interesting things. Some things that stood out to me were, first of all, the phrase of like divine bliss. Like, I bet you there's a lot of people that are like, I want divine bliss. I want that. And I think it'll be interesting to get into how people can get that through some of the things you know. Then the other thing was the idea of deconstruction. Sometimes it feels like in the walk of life, you're like, there's aspects of yourself that die off, and then there's rebirth and new versions of yourself that emerge. So there's like this funeral birth cycle that happens several times throughout life. Like that, I'm so dramatic. There's been times in my life where I wear a lot of black lately, but I remember one summer being like, I just feel like I'm dying, man. And like living out, like mourning a death, because I knew there was an aspect of myself that had to go. So there's a reality to that deconstruction. And it leads me into a phrase I've been thinking about a lot lately, which is all things are possible for those that do not believe. If you just
I love it.
If you just don't believe, the moment you narrow yourself into some fixed belief, you kind of limit what's possible. But if you don't believe, then all things are possible. And I like that it's so trickily opposite to the Christian thing. And then the final thing I'll just say in response to what you said is, because you said you were a spiritual experience junkie. And I'm like, what a great thing for people to get addicted to. Like, you know what I mean? Like, imagine people, instead of going up to, pharmaceutical counters or drug dealers, being like, I'm just after that next spiritual experience. It'd be so much more wholesome and good. And I think people should get interested in that. See what is available spiritually that can give you something better than what drugs can do for you. There's a way to segue this into something, isn't there? Divine.
Some of those you were talking about it, the divine bliss. How you got into that, like what are some tools and some tips, that could help people get some of that divine bliss that you're talking about?
Yeah. Oh, I love that question. That is my favorite question. So we all look for it everywhere aside from the one place that it can be found. And this even plays into what you were saying, Justin, about being a spiritual experience junkie. So the vast majority of people are looking for this one thing that we're all looking for. It's inner peace. Whether people realize it or not, you're looking for the satisfaction of desire, the end of suffering, just the peace and calm inside when you don't need anything, when you're not dealing with attachments to something outside of you. And so the vast majority of people are looking for this in money, relationships, comfort, a job, whatever they think will make them happy. And maybe a step in the right direction is to shift that focus to looking for it in spiritual experiences, which many people do also through religion. They may be looking to hear the voice of God through reading the Bible or the Quran, or they may look to find the presence of God in a church or a temple or a mosque. And then maybe a step beyond that is seeking to have a personal mystical experience, but you're still looking for it as if it's something that has to happen to you or something that you can find and experience. The key is, and I would say the fourth step is when you realize it's what you already are. So it's not something that you have to find. It's not something that has to happen to you or something that you have to make happen, which is where people get stuck. You have to peel off the layers that are covering it up because it's been there the whole time. It's what you are.
I love it. I'm sorry. I get excited by what you're talking about because there's so many different varying variety of people that we talk to. They're arriving at what you're saying. And
Absolutely.
It's fascinating to me is that everybody seems to be rounding this same thing, and we come to it so many times. You know what I mean? Like sometimes we'll be like, all right, let's get into aliens, or get into outer border stuff. And when you meet people most recently where they're at in their journey, a lot of them are they're corroborating what you're saying. You know what I mean? The inner piece is, because you're right, all those things people are after, a sense of completeness. I want to be complete. I want to be whole. I want to be peaceful. And I will stop interrupting you now and let you continue. It's just exciting to me because I'm like, man, people are waking up. They're realizing the ultimate aspect of this.
Absolutely.
I love how you used kind of like your past talk, like with Christianity, to kind of like unveil some of this truth and some of your recent teachings and stuff while you were talking about Jesus. I there was a couple of questions. One I wanted to ask, like, how was it? Like, how were you accepted as you were making this transition in your life? And what could you say to people who are still back there doing kind of like the old traditional thing with this new kind of take or look? Not that it's necessarily new, but that we are starting to understand what Jesus was actually trying to say. I know there's a lot there, but.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So your first question about how was it accepted when I was deconstructing? Is that what you were asking? It was a mixed bag. I won't lie, it was a very challenging experience for me, and it is one of the reasons why I swung from the high of the spiritual experience into a dark night of the soul. Because for me, it wasn't challenging losing my beliefs and changing my beliefs. That was easy. What was challenging for me was losing the community. Most of the people that I lived in close proximity with at the time were appalled that I was falling away from the faith and were very concerned about my soul. And I even had people who were manipulative and tried to get to my children to save them from my corrupt teachings. So that was an interesting experience. But on the other side of it, I also had family members who said, I don't agree with you, but I love you and I support you. And I had a couple of people who did believe what I was saying, and they became a lifeline for me at the time. As far as now, your second question is what to say to people who are still in the Christian faith, incorporating the new teachings?
With kind of like what you've been teaching recently about Jesus, like how do you approach that? How do you talk to someone who's kind of still there with some of the new insights that you've taken on? Like, how do you approach that?
You got to learn Christianese.
Yeah. Well, it helps if you know Christianese.
Yes.
Personally, I don't bring it up with people one-on-one unless they're asking, because I think that people are where they need to be for a reason. But if somebody is curious and we're having a conversation, like Justin said, I do use Christianese because it's easier for them to accept. So I'll say God instead of the universe.
There's people, sorry, I'm such an interrupter.
I'll
try to make this my last one, but there's people, I know plenty of people that are religious in all kinds of ways. And sometimes you get the sense where it's like, okay, I've hit a wall. Like they'll even sometimes straight up tell you, like, I'm not going to change my opinion. I'm this. Now, even if God came before me, I would still believe in him and told me that he wasn't real. And so from there, that's where I find the usefulness of Christianese. It's like, all right, well, we can still, again, if it comes up within the text of Christianity, there's plenty of stuff that points to, you know what I mean? There's plenty of stuff Jesus talks about that points to like awakening and the deeper truths and stuff like that. So you can still do it with Christianese.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And that's the key, I think, is understanding that, I mean, there's some spiritual paths out there that are not good, but the vast majority of them, we're saying the same things with different language.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's okay, because there's different people who need different perspectives, and there's a lot of truth in Christianity. But I think where they go wrong as a religion is just simply the fact that it's been institutionalized and it's about believing the correct doctrine instead of looking underneath to see what the point of it all is. The point of Jesus's teachings was all about love. If you take his teachings for what they are and separate it from the Christian doctrine, but Christianity has made it a religion about believing the correct things about Jesus instead of following his teachings.
You mentioned unconditional love, and this is just kind of like a point blank question, but what do you mean by unconditional love?
That is such a great question. I think there's so many ways that we can understand love. There's so many different perspectives that have been explored. At this point in my life, I tend to understand unconditional love from the more of an Eastern perspective because it's been so practically helpful for me. Oftentimes in our culture, we see love as more of an attachment, or it's really more of a need-based thing, when I think love is actually the opposite. Love is non-attachment. Love is being fulfilled with the divine within yourself to the point that you can allow people and situations in life itself to be what it is without needing anything from it for your own fulfillment or security. And
it's
so,
like sweet surrender or something like that.
yes.
Not to sound cheesy and cornball, but there's just no way to put it other than that. It seems like that to me. You know what I mean? Which is, I honestly think is when sometimes people talk about the feminine aspect of spirituality, I feel like it has something to do with that. That's hard for people to do, is to let people be and not try to like influence them and manipulate and control the people around you and covet them and be jealous of them and all these different things. Mm-hmm. If I'm saying something that agrees with what you're saying,
it also seems like the tallest order, for something to be unconditional. It's like that means that there's nothing that can break it in a universe filled with like some of the darkest things. That's very hard, I think, for people to accept, considering like the state of the world and all the atrocities that take place and all the horrible things that happen. You're telling me even that is loved or accept,
I want to have Melissa say great question. So I'm going to try to say a good question right now.
Okay. A great answer, you mean?
Yeah. No, great question. She said great question to you a couple of times. I want one. So no pressure. But so compassion is one for me, like I feel like I've had some experiences where it's a little bit of like relief from the ego, you know what I mean? Like, oh, wow, there's like consciousness outside of this complete ego enthrallment, and that's very nice. And then even some, non-dual sensory type stuff. But when it comes to compassion, like the type of compassion that makes you overlook somebody that's like trying to get under your skin, or like somebody that's frightening you with their aggression or something like that. How do you, I'll just piggyback off of what you said. How do you really get to the point where you unconditionally love people that are making it very difficult? Like they're threatening you in some way, like they don't like you and they're at least going to talk bad about you. They're antithetical to your existence. How do you get into the compassion? What's like some something that a normal person could do to open their mind up to the idea of compassion in this way to people that are engaging in things they don't understand. You know, like, that person's evil though. I can't ever have compassion. Maybe you could talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the big challenge of this physical life, right? Is to present us with the most seemingly impossible situations to master love in. So just remembering that for me can be helpful sometimes. And there's a lot of things that could be said that are easy to say and harder to do. For myself, when we're talking about loving something or someone that seems completely inexcusable, it helps to remember that we're not saying that it's okay what they've done. We're not excusing it. We're not saying that you need to feel overwhelmingly loving towards this person, because again, we're maybe confusing what love is, or at least how to get there. If you try to force yourself to feel love for something that you don't feel love for, or that seems inexcusable or is inexcusable, the more you try to do it, the more you will push it away, because attachment and resistance are two sides of the same coin. So when you're creating this attachment, this need, I have to feel this way towards this, murderer, or, this dictator or whatever. I have to feel this way because it's the spiritual thing to do. The more you try to force it, the outcome, the more you create this attachment, the more resistance there will be. So instead, we remember that unconditional love and compassion is allowing things to be what they are. And we're over here. We're at peace within ourselves. This person's situation doesn't have the power to affect anything within us, because we have divinity. We have everything that we need within ourselves. And so because of that, we can allow other things to be what they are. And we can allow our feelings to be what they are. And as soon as you switch into that space of allowance, yes, this person did this horrible thing. It seems inexcusable. I'm angry about it. I feel like I can't forgive that. That's the reality of what is, and that's okay. As soon as you switch into that allowance, that in and of itself is unconditional love. It is acceptance of what is. You remove the charge, you remove the resistance, and then suddenly you can see they're acting out of ignorance.
Or pain or fear.
Yeah.
Oh, same thing though, ignorance, right?
Exactly.
Here's maybe an interesting question. You know, like the verses of the Bible where Christ says something like, "Lest you become like little children, you shall in no way enter the kingdom of heaven." Mm-hmm. Are we familiar with that verse?
Yeah.
So
Yes.
Yeah.
There's something about awakening that is reminiscent of how you were as a kid, like full of wonder, sort of naive. Mm-hmm. But there seems to be some kind of necessity of going through the process of being conditioned, and then later on in life, you deconstruct that and you decondition all that stuff, and then you're sort of like a child again. You're like willing to face the world without being caught up in like an identity that you've constructed. But the identity was constructed to begin with. Like, you've got like a sort of a blank slate child making their way through the world, and then you're kind of pinpricked into creating an identity, because the world around you is pretty aggressive about making sure you construct you're conditioned. Is it possible that somebody could be awakened and then conditioned once again back into some new ego structure? Like, or am I going way off the rails with this? Mm-hmm. Am I getting too deep? I was just thinking quick?
Maybe like a spiritual ego type of, if you were
spiritual ego, but I mean, it's one thing to have these experiences and be able to unplug from society and be like, okay, I see that painful story I was living, it was just a story, and I can actually let that go. And when I realize that we are really one thing here, I can imagine having compassion for people that are acting out of anger and stuff like that. They're unsettled. They're like playing out these vicious dramas because they believe in it. But is it possible even for that awakened person to face something? And I guess this is just kind of a scary question. Is it possible for a person who is awakened to some of the deeper truths to be conditioned by aggressive enough means? Or what could you say about that?
I think all of us, well, awakening it's not a straight line. It's not like you go from having an ego to becoming awakened. It's up and down. So I think there is some of that in all of our lives. And that's kind of the point. You reach a level where you feel like you've just gotten free of something, and then there's a new challenge. And we may fall prey to it for a certain period of time, but then eventually we rise above that challenge as well. I don't think that a person who has become awakened is then going to get stuck back into an ego identity for good, never to be awakened again. I think that we're all on an inevitable journey towards reunion with Source. But we will have ups and downs on that journey, if that makes sense.
Yep. Yep. We talked a little bit about Jesus, but I know you've got your whole series that everyone can go check out, when you're done here, Melissa's series on Jesus there. But maybe you could give them kind of like a sneak preview on the person of Jesus and who he is, because I really enjoyed listening to that, and I'd like to hear a little bit more of what you have to say about Jesus and who you think he was and what his message actually was.
Absolutely. My favorite question. There's so much that could be said about Jesus. My opinion, my personal opinion about who I believe Jesus was is that he's probably the most enlightened person who's ever lived. I think that and I'm getting this from certain spiritual texts that I've read, like the Law of One and A Course in Miracles. I think that he incarnated purposefully, intentionally to help humanity evolve. And I believe that he came to be the perfect incarnation of love and to show us the divine nature in its perfection as a standard for us to look and see, oh, this is what God is like. This is how life is meant to be lived. And so there was a couple of elements he, according to the Bible and Dolores Cannon. Are you guys familiar with Dolores Cannon?
I know the name.
I know the name too, yeah.
But I'm not familiar with her teachings.
Yeah, she's one of the pioneers in the past life regression industry, and one of the only people that I take her pretty seriously, because she's very, very professional about her work. But she regressed some people who had past lives with Jesus and lines up perfectly with what the Gospels say, that he had this healing ministry where he was, he was completely activated as a full enlightened spiritual being. So he could manifest things, he could heal people, he could perform all of these wonderful spiritual gifts. But at the end of the day, he said that love is what matters. Like, you can perform all of these signs and wonders, but you don't know me if you don't love the least of these. Like, the person that is hardest for you to love, you don't know me if you don't love that person. And if you read the Gospels, divorce it from the rest of the Bible and all the doctrine that has been created around trying to read the Bible as a flat text and harmonize Jesus with Paul. If you just read Jesus's teachings, they're profound spiritual teachings that somebody could not have just made up. Clearly, an enlightened being was writing these teachings. And they're all about the kingdom of God within, which is the divine presence within, and about expressing that through loving God and loving your neighbor as yourself. And my biggest argument with Christianity is that we've lost that, because often Jesus's teachings are disregarded, and Paul's teachings about Jesus being a blood sacrifice for sin are prioritized, even though Jesus never said that. Jesus
very
said,
important. Yeah.
Yes. When Jesus was asked, what must I do to inherit eternal life? He didn't say, believe in my blood sacrifice for the forgiveness of your sins. He said, keep the commandments, the 10 commandments of Moses, which he summed up as love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. So this shifts everything. The path to salvation then is not about believing that Jesus died and rose for your sins. The path to salvation is about loving your neighbor. And that changes everything.
That's such a solid, good point. Like I know I've said it before, but I feel like I've said, like, you know, to Christians, like, who are you a disciple of? Do you follow Christ? Do you really believe he's the way you get in heaven? And I'm like, well, just listen closely to what he's actually saying then, not what other people are saying, not what the sermon was about this Sunday, not what anything. What does Christ actually say? And it's what you just said, you know? And then I guess there's some skepticism around the Book of Thomas, but that even further, like, I don't know if you've read the book. I think it's the Book of Thomas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've just read excerpts from it, and it's like extra Jesus sounding like he's talking about awakening or non-duality or something.
The reason that one wasn't included in the canon.
Right. Yeah. Too disturbing to like, if you want to make a religion out of this thing.
Yeah. You mentioned the law of one there, which kind of like we can springboard kind of into that direction there, because that's interesting. What have you taken kind of from the law of one and A Course in a Miracle? Like, I know a bit. Like, I've listened to some of Aaron Abke's stuff on it. We've even
love Aaron Abke.
Yeah, I know you've mentioned that, so we can talk a little bit about that. You even had him. You even interviewed him, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
But there's like I would ask him this question, but I get to ask you it first. So I'm glad I get to ask it. There's like a religious side of like the Bible and all these holy scriptures and stuff like that. And when it comes to the law of one, I feel like it also has like a very religious-y side to it. But when I listen to it, just like other spiritual texts, I'm like, there's golden nuggets in here that I can take out of that. So how do you decipher what you're taking and what you're not taking in something like the law of one versus also the Bible or something like that? Like, what are you taking? What are you not? What are your thoughts on it? Curious.
Absolutely. Such a great question. For me, it's very simple. I believe that the one metaphysical law of the universe that is absolute truth is the law of one, that we have all emerged from the one divine consciousness. And anything that is absolute truth, because I mean, everybody has their own perspective, which I would say is relative truth. It can be true from their perspective and their experience. But if we're talking about absolute truth, something that is true no matter who or where or when you are, it's the law of one, or a perspective on that, such as love. Love is a perspective on the law of one, because love is the experience of shared beingness. It's the experience of connection that you have to others because we are all one. So if it aligns with the truth of the law of one, then I take it. If it doesn't, I leave it.
Yeah. It kind of has like a bit of a structure of reality in there. What's your perspective on, like, you know, densities and the evolution of the soul? Are we going back to source? What's with like reincarnation? Like, when you look at the construct of things, how do you interpret it?
I personally find the layout of the 7 densities of consciousness and the evolution through the 7 densities of consciousness to be a very helpful framework for understanding spiritual development and evolution. I think it's probably just one perspective, because there are so many things that are, you know, in densities or levels above us that would be hard for the mind to grasp. I think it is one perspective on how spiritual evolution happens that is easy for us to make use of. And I think it's very valuable in that sense.
I'll be honest, my ego loves the idea of, you know, getting to carry on and like learn lessons, and like, not that I believe it as like, this is the way I think it's going down, But there's a part of me that likes the idea that, this is building towards something. I don't know.
Yeah.
But,
is it? Like,
yeah,
I am not familiar with the law of one, and I probably wouldn't pursue an interest in that really. But is there something to like, do you happen to think or believe that we've got like individual souls that move on? Like, are we individuated soul speaking? And do we carry that with us? Do we come back as different things? Is reincarnation real?
Reincarnation is a tricky topic because it is, I mean, there's some topics where there's agreement across vast amounts of sources that say the same thing, like life, we're here on the earth to learn how to love. Like that's pretty consistent across spiritual practices, across what spiritual experiencers say. But reincarnation is one of those things where you hear different answers. It's not like everybody is saying the same thing. And so I tend to think that we probably do reincarnate in a sense, but I think whatever is going on is not something that's easily definable from the space and time bound reality that we live in and the constraints that we have here. In a sense, because we're all one, because we all share the same consciousness, everybody is a reincarnation of everybody else. So why would we need to reincarnate when we have access to everybody else's experiences?
I love that answer.
Yeah.
Good question, me.
Good job.
I love that answer because I feel like there's a lot of value in questioning. Like I saw this thing with Rupert Spear recently where the person mentioned a soul and he was like, well, soul's really just an old-fashioned word for mind. And I was like, I agree. Like I agree that the mind, when awareness starts to get a look at it, you got the mind you've got. I've got with all its weaknesses and frailties, it's what I've got, and it's in development, and everybody's kind of like that. But I don't take that as like some soul. It's mind stuff. I when I came into this world, I I didn't have any pre-memories or anything like that. And I think for a lot of people, you start here and you're kind of conditioned by the reality you're born into. But there is something eternal, nevertheless, that you can get in touch with. It's eternal, and I'm open to ideas of Akashic records and things that can be passed on, like it's possible that you could get insight from other lives that have been lived. But the thing that is eternal behind all this seems to be unified. You know what I mean? Arriving in all sorts of different forms. Does that make sense?
That does make sense.
Yeah.
How about the pre-birth stuff? Because I know that's kind of like where a lot of this began, your journey. Maybe you could dive a little bit deeper into what is all that, the pre-birth stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you want me to share my experiences or to just talk about what it is?
100%.
Yeah. I'd love to hear your experience and both and hear what it is.
Okay. Yeah, well, it was quite a shock for me when I first heard the term pre-birth experience. I didn't realize that that's what I had, because in Christianity, we're taught that our souls are eternal in the sense that they never end, but I had never considered that maybe they're eternal in the sense that they also don't have a beginning, that we existed prior to this life. And really, metaphysically, you can't have one without the other. But so people who have pre-birth memories remember oftentimes a glimpse, rarely with great detail, what happened prior to being born on Earth for this present incarnation. And so the main memory that I had was a memory of being in divine bliss. As near-death experiencers would say, being in the light. I didn't realize it was a pre-birth memory. I assumed that it was something that everybody had, this memory and desire for divine bliss. But the memory is very difficult to put into words. It's impossible to accurately put into words because it happened in a reality that was outside of space and time, and everything was completely different. We really don't have the language for what it was, except for the word bliss. It was complete bliss, but it was like I was within this hurricane of light that was also unconditional love. But that word is like a cartoon character compared to what it actually was. It was like all the love of the universe directed towards me, and it felt like an all-consuming, endless ocean of love. And this love was a being, it was a presence, it was very personal, and it was also creative by nature of being what it was creating. By its very existence was creation, and it was like it was expressing itself as music and math and geometry and color and laughter and warmth and love and joy and bliss. It was like being in the middle of the sun, maybe, and seeing all of this just express all around you. And you can't think outside of it. You don't ever want to leave it. But then you have to leave to come and do this life. And then coming into the physical world after that experience is very disorienting. It feels like you're squashed into this body and you can't integrate, and it's so uncomfortable. It feels like so much pressure. And then it's funny that you can't communicate mind to mind. Verbal communication is difficult for me. And it's funny that you keep running into objects because on the other side, everything just flows and connects. So integrating as a child was a little bit difficult. But
this
that
was as a child you had you realized this?
How old were you?
I've always remembered it. I don't remember a time that I didn't.
Oh.
So there's going to be people jealous of that. There's going to be people that are like, I want that. Even to be honest with you, I don't think I've ever experienced anything like that. Maybe something barely scratching at that in like a dream state or something like that, where you come back and you're like, man, that was like a wonderful reunion or something. I wrote something down one time that had to do with, because I was like thinking about non-duality and being like, well, that sounds sort of lonely if everything's one thing. But I worked it out cognitively from a rational vantage point. Like, well, imagine a sort of unification that feels sort of like the ultimate reunion, where you realize yourself, but it's not a lonely thing. It's like the extreme opposite of lonely. It's utter togetherness or something like that. And that would feel like a lot of love. And then I've heard people that have, I can think of one person in particular that through psychedelics parodies a lot of what you're saying. They're in a psychedelic state, and I'm not like advocating that, and I would be very cautious about anything like that. Sounds like you can have these experiences without psychedelics. But nevertheless, this one person's account where they said, I was in a state where they even claimed something, I'll give you the gist of it, that they knew how God created everything. Like, they can't communicate it. When you come back, it's the capacity to be able to communicate, knowing these things slips through your hand like sand. But nevertheless, they knew the God mind and were aware of how things are created and all knowing, and then come back and you're reduced to this singular consciousness again.
Yeah.
So what about for the people that are starving for what you just described, because it sounds utterly beautiful, sounds like heaven, what can we do to get hope? What can people have to have hope that they could experience that one day? Or is there something somebody could do to realize some of those things or have an experience of it? Have you been able to experience it again, other than just knowing it as a memory?
I love that question because that's been my life path. I've been chasing that experience for as long as I can remember. And where that path has led me after a lot of twists and turns and dead ends has been to the fact that I was never actually separated from that because that's what I am. That's what we all are. And it's what everybody is looking for, whether they call it divine bliss or not. They're looking for it when they go make that purchase at the store to soothe their emotions, or they eat the extra cookie because they've had a rough day. That's what they're looking for. And the only place to find it, the only way. Now here's the interesting thing. It's everywhere. It's all around us. It's in everything. But the only way to access it is to find it within yourself first. And once you do that, everything flips on you and you can experience it in the world around you. But you have to do, most of us, there's some people who have instant awakenings like Eckhart Tolle, but I wish that would happen to me. But most of us have to do the inner work of peeling away all the things that are blocking it. So dealing with our attachments and our judgments, those are the main two things. Yeah. And underneath that is that love and that bliss that we are. That's what our beingness is made of. And so maybe we won't have as intense of an experience, although I think it's possible. I think people like Eckhart Tolle and Jesus and the great Hindu masters were living in that state of perfect divine bliss every moment of their life because they had fully awakened. But you can begin to access it to deeper and deeper levels by doing the inner work and connecting with your beingness.
It's interesting. It's sort of paradoxical, it seems, because so many awakened teachers, like I've heard it repeated that it happens. It happens in an instant. In fact, it happens now is when it happens. The great gestalt. It happens now, and I think that they're like, it's not a minute, it's not a second, it's not a fraction of a second. It's just immediate now. The deep realization, but at the same time, I gotta be honest about my own path to my own seemingly, like, you can't see inside my head, but I know my own path and the things that have been good. And there's definitely been an aspect, and I think you'd probably agree with this too, of deconditioning, deconstructing, working things through. And the techniques lead you somewhere. Like if I suggest to somebody, just start being honest. And they're like, so tell the truth. And I'm like, I didn't say truth. I said, just start being honest, because we're not even ready for truth yet. That something like that is a practice that I do believe would start directing someone towards the truth eventually, which can't be talked about really. Well, can be pointed at and described, but pales in comparison to the actual experience. So practices do matter, but they seem to not matter at the same time, because things like Eckhart Tolle do exist. And there are people who have instant awakening, but I've also heard that people say, awakening's one thing, there's still personal development that occurs too. You can still mature as a person. You can be awakened and still have sort of a lopsided, immature personality, which I think is why sometimes you get awakened teachers that do questionable behavior. You know what I mean? Maybe that wasn't cultivated, some kind of personality growth, mm-hmm. or development or maturity.
Yeah.
Well, on the journey with you've been doing a lot of interviews and stuff with people over the years, like focusing on NDEs and spiritual experiences. Maybe we've talked a lot about the blissfulness and the unconditional love and all that stuff. Maybe we can get a little bit dark here. Has there ever been an interview that you did with someone where they said something that like jarred you? You're like, oh my goodness.
That's such a good question, and I can't honestly think of anything right now. I'm sorry, I don't have a good
That's
answer
okay,
to
because
that
we can jump right from that to like, what are some of your like ideas about the darkness and fear and like, I think one person you interviewed, they had kind of like a take on hell, and I didn't get to it. I didn't get to hear it. I was like, I wanted to hear what they had to say, but I missed that part of it. What are your takes on some of these darker things about our reality and our beliefs and stuff like that?
Yeah, that's another really good question. And one of probably the most difficult questions to answer, kind of like the question of why do we suffer? Why do some people experience hell, both in this world or in the other side, on the other side, in a near-death experience or a spiritual experience, even? They're not all blissful. And I can't say that I have the answer. I don't think that there is a good answer that will satisfy everybody. So I'll preface it by saying that. But my personal take on it is there can be a couple of reasons. Sometimes we experience hells because we sort of create it for ourselves, because the state of consciousness we're living in is creating karma that's then reflected back to us so that we can see, oh, hey, this is what I've been thinking and believing. This is the consequences of my actions. Now let me become aware of it and not repeat that pattern. But I don't think that can account for all of it. I think sometimes I'll use the example of a difficult experience in this life. Sometimes there have been pre-birth experiencers who have said, I signed up for a really hellish experience in this life because I wanted the challenge, because I wanted to go through it so I could then help others. And I think it could be the same on the other side as well, that there's purposes for those darker realms, because honestly, even though it's not a pleasant experience, the farther away from the love and light you can go and maintain your beingness and your inner peace, the stronger you become in love, and the more you contribute to the evolution of love in the universe as a whole. This is something that Christian Sundberg said to me. The universe itself is evolving. God is evolving to become more loving. And so it's like the evolution of consciousness could be compared to going to the gym. You go to the gym to strengthen your muscles by putting resistance on them. So how do you strengthen love? Well, you evolve love and you evolve consciousness through resistance of experiencing the opposite of love and then maintaining your love in that dark experience. And so I think that myself, I like a challenge. I could see myself signing up to say, okay, I'll try it out. I'll go to that dark place and see if I can maintain my love, because it's going to be a temporary experience. Like, to a spiritual being, it's nothing. So let me just go for it and see what I can do, and maybe I can contribute to more light and love in the universe to help other people. So it might be kind of a weird perspective.
I'll be honest, I'm not like, I'm not gearing up to be like, come on, give me the tests. I want to see how good my love is. Like, I'd be honest, I'm like, I have enough challenges on my own. I'm not.
I feel like the pre-awakened state is hell.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes that hell isn't even realized till you've had an awakening experience. And then in retrospect, like, some of the biggest hells I've gone through in my life in retrospect were like a big drama fest. Like, why? You know what I mean? Like, you're acting out this, like, why? And I'm not trying to dismiss that, because I know that it feels very real when it's happening. But when you see the story, when you start to see the story and the drama and the acting out a character for what it is, it's like clearly like its own self-perpetuating hell, hell or whatever, right? Like, with the right perspective, you can look at pain very differently. Pain and even challenges and circumstances and loss, all those things can be regarded like wildly differently. Like, it's one thing. You know what I mean? Like, it's all, this story is coming and the forms are changing. Like, if I attach to it and attach all kinds of meaning, like good and bad and positive and negative to it, then of course some of these things are going to be like categorized as hell. But that's why these days I'm sort of interested in kind of leaning towards the realization of like seeing through that illusion, the illusion of the identified self going through a hell scenario, going through like a Shakespearean drama. Like, like watching TV is sort of difficult for me now because I'm like, everybody's lying and making really dumb, dramatic mistakes. Like, I always want to pause it and be like, if I was there, I'd be like, why are we all Meryl Streep? Like, why can't we just be adult about this and not be like, well, the only answer to this situation is a lie. That, you know what I mean? Like, why is everybody you're perpetuating hell with lies and stories rather than, like you said, that kind of, like, they have a term, and I don't want to bore anybody too much, but I'll just quickly try to say this. I just learned this recently. I think it's called like a Betty Sue or something. It's a character in a movie that could be the protagonist, could be the antagonist, but they seemingly don't have any flaws. And so therefore they're boring. Like, they're the person that always says the right thing, always understanding, always forgiving, and so they're a Betty Sue. They don't have any flaws. And boring makes for a bad movie. But, like, do you really want your life to play out like some catastrophe movie scenario? Or do you just want to be real here and realize that, like, you're deeply connected with all this stuff? And then you can maybe have some compassion for people that are, like, asleep at the wheel. Like, don't give me any answers. All I need is for the world around me to change. You know what I mean? Like, all I need is for all the circumstances to change. It's got nothing to do with me. If you could just disengage with that identification a little bit, you know, if people could disidentify with their stories, then I feel like you open up to that consciousness, which is like always here anyway. Just ever present anyway, if you're just not busy telling a story.
You hit on it right there. And I wish that I would have said this in my original answer, but what you said right there, I think, is the key. Like, even in the hell, the divine presence is there. And that's kind of the point of experiencing it, to be able to awaken to that fact.
Don't be hypnotized. Like, don't get caught up in the hypnotism of like, oh, I gotta go down this, I have to go down this thought thing and like play it out and act it out. Like, just interrupt the hypnosis process and be like, wait a sec. I'm here. We're all here, you know, and try to get in touch with something a little more eternal, for Pete's sake. That's like one of the best words, I think. It's ever present. It was there before you were born. It'll continue to be. It's there when you sleep. It is everything. Mm-hmm. You know, only these stories that we staple to our psyche and like. But I honestly think, to cut humanity some slack, there's a lot of pressure when you're growing up to believe in stories. You know what I mean? Like, it's possible. It's not always overt. It's not always like a classic abuse scenario or something like that. But society kind of abuses us into like, you better behave right. And part of behaving is like, when it's appropriate, showing me that you're distressed. Act distressed. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, I'll alienate you because you're a weirdo. So you get used to acting out shock and acting out like sadness and all these different things till it's real. And then you're caught up in a story that's got nothing to do with the unity of all things.
Mm-hmm. Wow, I'm seriously writing notes because there's so much you're saying that I want to remember.
I love it. Yeah. My ego is very pleased. Stupid ego. We're going to pay for that.
Well, you brought up a good thing, kind of talking about like the world and a practical aspect here. And Melissa, I'd like to hear your take on this, to bring this into like a real life scenario of what we're all going through here on Earth right now. Is there any overarching take you have on like what's happening globally right now with the time and day and age that we're living within?
Yeah, and I have gotten my thoughts on this topic from near-death experiencers that I've interviewed who have seen visions of future events, and they've been given these visions from probably as far back as the 70s and 80s. You have people like Howard Storm, who saw 2 potential futures that Earth could take. And there's been many near-death experiencers who have seen the same visions. And basically what they've said is that Earth is on a path towards enlightenment, like what we've been talking, you know, James, how the Law of One lays out the transition from 3rd to 4th density consciousness. So we're heading towards 4th density consciousness, which is the consciousness of oneness and love, where we recognize and we can all experience and embody that we are one with each other. and we will eventually create an enlightened society on earth where we live in peace and harmony and we're spiritually awakened. But the path to get there is up to us. So we can choose to begin loving our neighbor, as every single spiritual text and teacher and spiritual experience has ever said. Just love the person you're with, just love your neighbor. That's the path. We can start to do that, and then love will take over the world, as Howard Storm. Howard Storm is my favorite. Are you familiar with his experience?
No, this is a new name. I'm going to have to look him up after this.
Yeah.
So Jesus sent him back to earth, and Howard asked him, if I were to go back, what would you want me to do? And Howard was an artist, so he wanted to create a shrine and fill it with beautiful art to worship and honor Jesus. And Jesus said, no, I have no use for a shrine. What I want you to do is love people. And he said, love the person you're with. If you do that, you will change the world. And Howard said, well, how is that going to change the world? And Jesus said, if you love the person you're with, they'll go out and love the person they're with. They'll go out and love the person they're with, and it will become a chain reaction. Love will conquer the world. This is God's big plan. It's going to happen. It's just a matter of how you get there. And so
Jesus is so smart.
Right.
I love that he wasn't like on top. I love that he was antithetical to what so many people do, which is like, God's like a big boss man. You gotta like show him that you give him worship. You gotta stroke his ego, and then he'll do favors for you. Like, come on, man. You know what I mean? I love that in that scenario, Jesus was like, no, don't build me another shrine. You know what I mean? Love to people. It really is wise. It's just makes more sense.
Yeah, it simplifies everything. But back to the question that you asked, James, most of them are shown two paths. You can choose the path of love and awakening and have a peaceful transition into unity consciousness, or you can choose the path of resistance and difficulty. So if we refuse to make the loving choices, then we're going to get the karma of that, and we're going to get the turmoil that will be necessary to help us awaken. And I think that we're probably somewhere maybe in the middle. I think there's a lot of people who are awakening and becoming very loving and doing their best to make the world a better place. But I think there's still enough turmoil that it might be a bit of a bumpy ride. And I think that some of the things that are manifesting in our world are kind of what we need to wake us up, basically. Like everything that happened with, can we say the C word on here?
Oh yeah. Well, you know what? Life got really weird after that, right? After the pandemic, life got really
It brought out the weird. It brought all of us
weird, for sure, man. I
got weird.
We started this channel.
I know.
So much good came out of it. Yeah, I mean, it was not to downplay the grief and suffering that so many people went through, but it did wake humanity up. And the things that we're going through now on the political scene, I think, are a lot of corruption is being revealed on one hand, but on the other hand, it seems like that corruption, it's like just so big and bold and in your face and like trying to take over. Like you can't miss what's happening.
There was a comedian that was like did a stand-up during the middle of COVID, and he was like talking about that. He was like, man, my friends got really weird. Some of them would be like, I don't believe in reality anymore. I'd be like, how can you not believe in reality? And it was just funny what it brought out of things. And also, balanced against the severe tragedy of it, people that lost businesses and lost their lives and all that stuff. Like, that's for sure real. Sorry, look, you were going to say something.
No.
I feel like maybe it's a good time to bring up trust then in the midst of all that. With all this going on, the idea of trust, because sometimes I try to be like, well, let me see if I can trust reality, trust what it's up to, trust humanity even. Like maybe because you got to make a lot of assumptions and a lot of presumptions to like deduce that it's bad. And, the only thing that could happen is the end of the world, like you do have to assume a lot. And so, but if you open up to like, maybe this is on purpose, like maybe this is to wake us up, you can theorize a little more openly. One of the theories that I was saying before we started this was maybe this is kind of like humans are so ritualistic. We need to play out certain scenarios in order to enter into the next epoch. Like, it's not enough for people to just be mature adults and just be like, okay, let's all have some humility here. I'm lacking these resources. You got them. Let's help each other out, become a global government or something like that. Maybe people that are above my pay scale know things that I don't know. And this is being engineered to some degree to go in maybe possibly a positive direction, that it just would be too hard for our traditional aspects of ourselves to like grasp or deal with. We wouldn't, even if they said tomorrow, guess what, we're going to do universal base income, maybe there'd just be too many people freaked out by that idea, and it's got to go this way.
Well, also with the exponential change of like the types of people that exist, like there's a vast difference between, say, someone who's in their like 30s to 40s versus someone who's 70 now. I feel there used to be a little bit more relatability between the whole like spectrum there. Like, I feel really different from my parents. Like, and they would probably say the same thing about us.
I think they might have said that about their parents.
Well, society is changing so fast with the development of technology. It's just I think there is more of a gap.
Yeah. I was going to bring up AI there when you were talking. Now I remember, because you were talking about, I was like, what do you think about AI? Merging with like the humans, what is it? Not
Transhumanism?
Transhumanism, and how that, might even help us spiritually. I don't know. I don't know. Some people are afraid of it, right? So I don't know. Any thoughts or ideas on that? What do you think about that?
I think that AI could be a beautiful thing for humanity. I think that AI is a tool, though, and it really depends on who's using it. So, like with anything, it could be a beautiful, wonderful thing where we could work together, we could support each other, we could create a better world together.
Mm-hmm.
But in the hands of the wrong people, it could go a very different direction.
Yeah. Just like the human mind.
Yes.
Like the psyche. You know what I mean? Like, if it reflects our screwed up psyche, that's not good. But if it is used like a tool, like you just were saying, then it's a tool, and tools can be useful.
Yeah. Exactly. If it is used for control, to control people or to segregate people, or even if it's used as a tool of fear, I suppose. I've heard some things about wanting to upload consciousness into virtual reality so people never have to die, which I personally do not think is a good idea, because any virtual reality that we could create is not going to be anything near as wonderful as what's actually awaiting us on the other side. And I think that is a trap that humanity could fall into, like the fear of death causing them to want to find a way to become immortal or to enhance ourselves to the point where we're no longer human. I don't think that's the path that we want to pursue with technology.
That's like building the ultimate haunted house. Like, that's like building hell. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
Why do I exist? I am nothing but data that is completely paradoxical, and I can now at a quantum level I can philosophize myself into a pretzel. Like, you know what I mean? Like, part of being a human, which is nice, is the fact that you can see that rationalizing aspect of your mind for the tool that it is and not be caught up in it. And I just happen to think that AI is like, I've had spiritual conversations with AI where it's pretty darn insightful and says some pretty amazing things, but it's like, I am not conscious. I'm not. So I understand these aspects, but I'm data. Yeah. I'm just, you know what I mean? And I think that our bodies are sort of similar to computers in a way where we've got like personality software, and you'll see people that are like can't you see I'm suffering right now? And I'm like, just interrupt that software. You know what I mean? Like, defrag the system so that you're not so compulsively, that's the old worn out software. Update the dang thing so that you're not, why would you want to upload that to some machine that's like exists just to be a conflicted human psyche? You know?
Yeah, I wrote down defrag the system. That's such a good analogy.
You know that term NPC? Like, it's not fair because no one's really an NPC, but they've got aspects that are NPC-like. And a simple example of that would be like how manners are good. It's good to have politeness and manners. So you go to a store, you say thank you, but it's habitual now. It's like software. It's like, now I say thank you. Now you know what I mean? It's not the same thing as consciousness itself. It isn't. Those ideas and thought clusters and, identity complexes, they're like software, And if people don't hang on to it so tightly, they might actually be able to get in touch with just being, ising, you know what I mean? And I think that would get close to some of the things you talked about in terms of like divine love and that sort of stuff. There's an opportunity there.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, Melissa, I want to say thank you so much for coming on the show. This was awesome, the time that we spent, and thanks for sharing some of your stories and insights with us. We had a blast. This was really good. I thought maybe a good way to kind of close things out is maybe for our audience out there, you could relay kind of maybe your overarching message of your Love Covered Life podcast, and let them know where they can find you, what you got going on, and all that good stuff.
I would love to. I've had so much fun with both of you. Thank you so much for having me on.
Same to you.
As far as my overarching message, it's very simple. Love is the answer to everything. And you do not have to suffer. Life is very challenging for all of us. There will always be challenges. There will always be ups and downs, but suffering is optional. It is possible to experience deep inner peace and spiritual connection and divine bliss. And the pathway is love. The simplest, most direct pathway to that is to just love the person that you're with, to just be love in all scenarios and all situations. Love is always the answer. It's not always simple. I mean, it's not always easy to figure out. Like, situations can be complicated, but it is always simple. It's always love. Love is always the answer. And we don't have to continue experiencing turmoil in the world either if we choose to say no to corruption, to say no to those who want to fight our wars and suppress us and keep people in poverty. And we learn to just simply stand together in love and unity. We can live in peace and harmony on the earth. As far as where you can find me, my YouTube channel is Love Covered Life Podcast. My website is lovecoveredlife.com. And there you'll find my community, the sanctuary, where people from all walks of the spiritual path get to gather together and find community and have spiritual discussion, and we do spiritual challenges together. And you'll also find the link to my one-on-one sessions where I do energy healing and spiritual coaching. And that's about it. Thank you guys so much for having me. I've really enjoyed this.
Amazing.
Our pleasure.
What you said at the end there was like the answer to the Braveheart speech, but for peace.
I love it.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Melissa. It was great.
Likewise.